Okay, welcome back everyone. Our next session will discuss about the role of artificial intelligence, technologies, and their social impact on SDGs. As a computer scientist myself, I think this will be a very, very interesting session. And this session will be led by Professor Ki-Yeon Lee, Associate Professor at the Underwood International College here at Yonsei University. Professor Lee, we're all ready and eager for the panel.
Thank you. So the whole session will be...
Yeah, the whole session will be in Korean, yes.
Thank you. 안녕하세요.
Good morning. Welcome to AI for Better Engagement and Empowerment on UN SDGs. Welcome. I feel a bit nervous today. For this session, we will be discussing the thoughts that we need for the coexistence of AI and humans. We have invited young academics and young entrepreneurs for this session. And so from that perspective, we will take a look at what we need to consider as a society for AI. In particular, related to education and work. One of our young academic is myself. I am igee. Currently, I am an associate professor at the Undergraduate International College at Yonsei University, and I teach creative technology management. So mainly computer programming, literacy, and business data and machine learning. Recently, I have been studying how to instruct computers using language. And so I wish to create ethical AI. So that brings me to the end of my own introduction. Next is another young scholar, Dr. Seo. Would you like to introduce yourself? I am from Seogang University, and my name is Ha Young-jun. Currently, I am teaching media and entertainment at Seogang University. And so I would like to talk about my perspective of AI from that perspective. I'm sure that many of you are here today because AI is in the limelight, and many people are considering AI, and many people wish to work on AI because our MC today is also a professor of computer science. I actually studied industrial engineering, but I also wanted to study social sciences, and so my doctorate degree is on media and information studies. Currently, the field of research for me is media technology, including AI, but it's about the impact of media on individuals, societies, and groups. It's an honor for me to participate in this panel. Thank you very much. We have next a young entrepreneur, Mr. Seo Gi-suk. I am currently the CEO of Constructs, which is a social media network. The service that I am creating and the vision that we have at Constructs is to enable and facilitate relations between people using AI. So however developed technology is, interpersonal relations is always difficult. And so we wish to provide services for these aspects using AI. And we are currently developing our app, and I am managing Constructs. And I worked with unstructured data in my studies, and I researched areas to create value with unstructured data. Before I became an entrepreneur, I worked on digital transformation for different companies around the world. For example, digitizing work that was not digital in the past, and also to create assets out of their digital transformation. So I was a consultant before I became an entrepreneur, and based on my expertise, I would like to share with you how people should accept AI to create synergy effects in their education and work. I am here in the company of many prestigious professors, so it's an honor for me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, last but not least, we have another young scholar, Professor Yoo Sang-seok. Good morning. I am teaching at the business school of Yonsei University, and I am teaching various business systems. For my doctorate degree, I researched robot and human collaboration. Most of my research is focused on utilizing AI and robots so that they can collaborate with humans to create social and economic value. And when there is a collaboration between robots and humans, what are the socio and psychological impacts? That is what I am researching. Most of the research that I am conducting seems to be very interesting, but at times quite scary. Because before I jumped into this field of research, I always thought that I was an optimistic futurist. But the more I research this area, the more I can see that we cannot be just optimistic about future technologies. And so at this panel, I would like to take this opportunity to discuss humans, robots, and AI. And when robots and AI become an inevitable part of our society, what are the changes that we will be experiencing, and how should we respond to these changes? Rather than trying to provide you with answers, I would like to share with you my thoughts and also provide questions as food for thought. It's an honor for me to be a part of this panel. Thank you. Thank you very much. So you can see that everyone on the panel today are not people who continued their areas of studies that was the same as their undergraduate studies. So they continued to try and find their path. And so during this panel, you will be able to see various perspectives. And in terms of the relations between humans and AI, collaboration, education, and work, these are the areas that we can provide different perspectives for in order to better your understanding. In this era of human and AI coexistence, what are the aspects that we need to think about in terms of education and work? And if we can find some answers, what would those answers be? Let us start with Professor Yu Sang-seok or Professor Sa-young-jun.
사실 이제 이
When we think about, we probably all knew that we would be talking about education and work. And I've written down what I'd like to say on my smartphone. So I hope that you won't mind if I had refer to what I've written down on my phone. In terms of education, I think that AI, in terms of creativity, will AI promote creativity or limit creativity? That was what I wanted to think about. And I wanted to think about this from two perspectives. First of all, well, AI is increasingly advancing, especially generative AI. Technology is continuously being developed, and now content's development costs are dropping to almost zero. You've probably used a lot of these AI programs. If you give examples or orders, you will be able to see a lot of good outcomes coming out from these AI-based apps. But Herbert Simon, a scholar, once said, bounded rationality. He talked about this in the past. And from that perspective, you can say that humans are rational beings, and we always, rather than pursuing the most optimal outcome, we stop at what we can just be satisfied with at a certain level. So it's not because we're lazy, it's just because we're that type of being. So once AI produces something that we can be satisfied with, will we be just staying at that level and be satisfied, or will we be pursuing more? So in the long-term perspective, will humans production or the outcomes that we can generate be limited because we utilize AI? So will AI limit our potential going forward? And also, there is the possibility that we can exponentially produce things by utilizing AI. What I am concerned about is that in the future, as these contents are increasingly produced, we will be having to screen these contents, and there might be a lot of costs associated with this screening process. So if we think about education for our future generation, we will have to, of course, enable them to learn how to work with AI, but at the same time have the eye to really screen the AI contents of quality. So there has to be this critical thinking ability that the future generation will need to have. And number two, in terms of the technical side of AI, of course, at the core of AI, there is data, and you probably all know this, but data basically is something that we have collected. So, from some sense, we can say that AI actually is using what already exists and generates an outcome based on the data that already existed. So it's based on statistics in some sense. So it's mathematical statistics. What's the statistics of AI creating something based on what you already have? I talked about the bound rationality, and it's related to this. So I call this the bounded unpredictability. But when you use AI and you try to come up with a creative product, or when you engage in creative activities, this unpredictable side actually goes down. A lot of the creative people, if you look at them, you will find that their actions or the trajectory of their life, this unpredictability plays a very important role, especially in the world of arts, for example, or in science. So as AI continuously play an important role in our lives, I think that in the field of arts and science, we really have to think about how we are going to evaluate the talents in these fields and how we're going to foster these talents. And also, when it comes to the qualities that these talents have to have, we have to think about how we are going to nurture these talents in these people in these fields. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Professor Yu. And now let us go on to Dr. Seo Gi-soo, if you can add on to that. Yes, Dr. Yu, you talked about AI, and I think that you generally focused on the generative AI, such as ChatGPT, these services. These services have been increasingly provided to the public. And if you look at the students and the work that they've submitted to in their classes, they've been utilizing these apps or these platforms. And I think that what you've talked about in terms of the lack of predictability was based on the use of these services. And I do agree, because if you look at the projects or the work done by the students, of course, the use of AI lacks the predictability. But I think that that's different from the absence of predictability in terms of the talents that these students can hold. I think that, of course, we need the guidelines to promote the creativity of these students. But on the other hand, AI, well, in the process of education, we can really utilize AI to increase the creativity of students. For example, Microsoft's there's a scholar, Sakar, and he published a paper and said that AI actually can assist the classroom, the teachers, so that the creativity and the creative thinking can be enhanced, because AI can actually stimulate people's minds. AI can actually play the devil's advocate or ask an opposing question to really stimulate their thinking. So it's not just an assistant of a teacher that can be the role of AI, but actually AI can do more in the classroom. And when AI plays that role, well, it can also play the role of a bad cop, the bad cop, good cop, and actually bring out the unpredictability within the students. And that can actually help enhance the unpredictability within the students. So as Professor Yu mentioned, creativity is very important, and in order to foster greater creativity in the education scene, we have to think about what we can do. So as AI continues to advance, we have to think about how we can further utilize AI in various ways. And we have to think about the role AI can play in promoting creativity among people. So in the education field, I think that when it comes to the academic accomplishment, we also have to think about assessment or evaluations. In Korea, this is something that we've been contemplating over for a long time, and also in China and in Vietnam, of course, as well as in Korea. There has been heated enthusiasm over Korea, and most of the evaluations have been only through these standardized tests. And this has been a problem even before we had implemented the AI systems. So it's not just about how we teach, but also how are we going to evaluate the outcome of education. That's very important, and it's been a long challenge for our education system. It's not something that we can overcome or solve overnight, because this has been a long-standing problem for the Korean society for a long time, even before AI, and you probably all know this very well. But there's these standardized tests, and there's a recognition test, which is an examination that students take to see how well they can utilize what they've memorized. And even if we do utilize AI in the classrooms, I think that there are limitations to the utilization of these new technologies that are offered. So we have to think about what were the limitations to the existing institutions that we had in our education scene, and also the limitations of the exams and the evaluation methods that we had. So we have to think about new ways of evaluation. For example, the not just quantified, but quality-based evaluation might be one way. And also the AI can be used as a way to evaluate. For example, in the corporate scene, for example, AI, I understand, has been used for hiring people in a new way. And so we have to think about a new way, a fresh new way of utilizing AI to implement a new way of assessment and evaluation of students. I think that perhaps the AI can bring about a new positive, or point to a positive direction for evaluations in education.
유상석 교수님.
We have heard from Professor Yu and President Seo, and they both talked about the utilization of AI in education and how creativity could be boosted or even actually taken away. But I actually agree with that. It really depends on how we utilize AI as a tool. It could actually destroy creativity to a certain extent, or it could actually boost creativity. What I found quite surprising is that Mr. Seo is a CEO, and taking a look at how AI could be used in education was shown through his statement, and he actually worked in private academies, and we can see that he really thought about this issue quite a bit. I think from the last semester, I could see that some of our students are actually using ChatGPT for their reports or summarizing research paper. And I sometimes can see that ChatGPT comes up with some of the proposals that have been handed in by the students. And when that happens, I can see that the work done by ChatGPT is actually above average compared to the average of students. And so we have to think about this because if we take a look at graduate school, most of the work is about reading research papers and summarizing research papers. And so we really have to change the way we evaluate. And so if we receive reports, it's done by ChatGPT. So that really is not important. So we need to now talk to our students and we need to check if they are able to express their knowledge. So if they're only able to summarize given papers, then they cannot be better than ChatGPT. But they need to be able to talk about their insights and they need to be able to express what they know. And so we need to utilize ChatGPT in our future education, but we have to learn how we're going to utilize it. So what are we going to teach and how are we going to teach in the AI era? We always talk about this over drinks after work and also during meetings. And so sometimes we think about whether we need to continue to teach knowledge. We have simultaneous interpretation ongoing, but Google's Galaxy S24 actually also has interpretation services. So you can actually make a call in Korean and translate that into English. But Google Translate sometimes was not good in the past, but now it's great. And so what happened to the graduate school of interpretation and translation? What will happen to the professors at that graduate school? My wife actually went through that because my wife teaches at a college and she teaches English. 20 years ago, when I was in college, a lot of the college students wanted to listen to English classes, and learning English was very important back then. And so they all wanted to sit through English classes. But now, she teaches English writing, and the students, they don't want to learn English writing and English composition because they know that ChatGPT can do it for them. They don't want to learn about the techniques of making English sentences. They believe that ChatGPT can do it better. So my wife actually is in quite a chaotic situation because she knows that the students don't want to learn what she is teaching. And so she started to change her lesson plans and she introduced problem-based learning, PBL. So English is not the ultimate goal. English is a tool. When I was a college student, we wanted to focus on learning English. That became a goal. We memorized vocabulary, we studied sentence structures, but all of that can be done by ChatGPT now. And so we have to think about why we learn English today. Because they want to communicate in English. Because compared to the past, there are more opportunities to talk to people outside of Korea. And so we need to be able to talk to people outside of Korea and they need to be able to understand me. So my wife is actually focused on problem-based learning. So she's actually looking for situations where English communication is necessary. And let's say that there's a problem of a public library, and if you are working at the public library and you're looking for ways to market and find ways to receive financial support for your library. And in order to persuade policymakers, you need to be able to share your ideas. So you can use ChatGPT, but you have to be able to evaluate the results of ChatGPT. And so that is the type of class that my wife is actually running. And so it actually is not just an English class, but it actually incorporates philosophy and marketing and other aspects into English. If you are a professor of philosophy, then you're probably using other perspectives from the industrial perspective, but it's all actually becoming problem-based learning. So in conducting the class today, I always remind myself that this is just a tool and we also have to think about the ultimate goals. So I am now rethinking the classes that I am currently conducting. Thank you very much for your remarks. We have heard quite a bit of opinions. If I may, I would like to try and summarize. Professor Yu talked about generative AI and creativity. And you also talked about the issue of cost. So there could be cost saving, which leads to low quality contents. And because we have boundless rationality, we continue to try and choose contents that are just enough, which means that creativity will not be as important as it used to be. Well, the point that I wanted to actually emphasize is not about the creation of low quality contents. In most cases, we just find that it's just enough. It's just acceptable. It's something that people will not complain about. That is the quality that we will continue to adjust to. Automatically, we will say it's good enough. And we will have more contents on that level. So people will possibly not try to go the extra mile because it will mean that we need to make more efforts to go that extra mile. And so I do believe that we will stop going the extra mile. And in the society, if we do make that effort, people will think we're extraordinary, and these extraordinary people may decrease in number. That is a concern that I have. Of course, what you summarized is also very important. Or the extraordinary people, they will look more amazing, because if there are more mundane people in our society, then the creative people will become extraordinary. Well, for me, when I use ChatGPT, what I do is when I use language, I notice that I don't have a very large vocabulary. But if I use ChatGPT for interactions and communications, I learn new vocabulary, and I also learn better vocabulary. Let's say that I'm not an expert in diplomacy and I have to talk to diplomats. And so I would ask ChatGPT to share with me how diplomats would make the same statement. And so I do believe that ChatGPT can be used to learn to a certain extent. And so I do believe that creativity and the abundance of expressions could increase through ChatGPT, but the way we use our language is actually directly linked to what we do, and so creative expressions can then be translated into other forms of creativity. Creative thinking, creativity are two concepts that I do believe that we need to distinguish. So creative expressions can improve, but creativity for problem solving, it can decrease. For example, if we are to write a report and we just copy it off ChatGPT results and hand it in, then that will lead to a decrease in creativity. When ChatGPT first arrived, it did happen with students and it did earn them good scores, for example, above a B, but you don't learn from that. And the students, they don't realize that in the beginning. And that's the same when Wikipedia first appeared on the market. So for example, if you use ChatGPT to write a report and you hand in the report from that, then you should be able to learn from that, for example, by communicating with ChatGPT.
있으시다면
If not, then let me continue and speak. So then there's this issue of evaluation. Everyone talked about this. The issue of evaluation, does it fit the purpose? You have to look at that. And then what is the purpose, the objective of education? We have to think about that. And on the other hand, when I engage in a conversation with ChatGPT and ChatGPT generates something, I can find that this is how humans are. For example, racism, the language that is used. and the vocabulary that is generally used. If you look at that, what is generated from GPT, you can see what kind of words are used in public, among the public. And so, like you said, the data comes from us, the public. And from the data and what is generated through GPT, we can see what's out there in society, and we can reflect upon ourselves. And I think that based on that, we can correct ourselves. Based on a reflection of ourselves. So that's a iterative process. So perhaps that actually can be an educational process, and it can benefit society because we can use AI to look back at ourselves. So it really depends on how we utilize AI. The outcomes depends on how we utilize it. So we really have to think in detail about what is and how we're going to utilize AI. So it all lies in the details. So the problems lie in the details. So that's another thing I think we should think about. And also, like you mentioned, rather than the means, we have to think about the purpose. We have to think about the core, the essence. And that opportunity is given to us. But as if we're in a race, because that side is using ChatGPT, I should also use ChatGPT. And as if we're in a race, we just continue to use AI, and we're just superficially trying to do something or achieve something. So I think that's where we're at this moment. Do you have anything else to add? No? Then thank you. Then, are there any other comments or questions that you would like to raise in relation to the education field that you would like to discuss here before we go on to the next section of our talk? Well, Professors Ha Young-jun, there was something that really stood out among what he said in terms of evaluation. Well, I think that this is the irony of the era of AI. He said that now verbal interviews or talking with one another has become even more important in this era of AI. And I think that this is quite interesting because we're going back to the era of Socrates or Pluto, because now we're really talking to one another and we're trying to prove ourselves. So that idea, and I think that a lot of people are agreeing, you're nodding. What we're trying to achieve through education is to make people more wise and smart. We want to achieve greater achievements, and we want to foster the people, the talent, who are able to create such outcomes. So I think that we're in that process of finding a way towards that goal. So that was quite interesting. And I think that additional thing that I would like to think about is that I have a long personal relationship with Professor Ha. And I did not mention this when I was introducing myself, but before I founded my startup, well, I did my master's degree, and I actually did an experiment about how to utilize technology for interactions with students in the education field. Well, the Korean ChatGPT application, do you know what is a killer app for this? Well, there is the translation. People tend to use ChatGPT for translation or for summarization, but routinely people use the application most frequently for what purpose, do you know? It's the teachers who use the application to record their student records. And this is based on public data, open data here in Korea. In Korea, the teachers have to keep records of their students about what are their academic attitude or behavior in their classrooms, and also what are their academic achievement levels. And they have to do this quite regularly. And because this is something that they have to do regularly, teachers tend to use apps for this activity. And the reason I mention this is that when we talk about applying AI in the education scene, we tend to talk about how students will be using AI, but we really never talk about how this will be utilized by the teachers in the classroom for their benefit. And also, we don't really talk about the guidelines for the use by teachers. For example, what would be the extent for the teachers to use this in the classrooms? Because technology tends to advance at a pace much more faster than we had anticipated. So we really have to think further when we think about emerging technologies. So we have to think further and deeper, and also we have to think about how it will be used not only by the students but also by the teachers. So I just wanted to add that part as well. Yes, in the current evaluation system or scheme, also you mentioned that there are some issues. For example, the AI contents. If you were to evaluate the contents created by AI, well, that evaluation will be used for the admissions to colleges, and that can be a problem. Well, yes, that is true. Well, but I won't specifically or directly talk about that. But for example, there are words, there's a limitation to the words that teachers can repeatedly use. So, and Dr. Yu, do you have anything else to add? Yes, well, if I add on to what I had said, well, I talked about the low quality contents that will be produced in mass. And I talked about how there will be a lot of social cost associated with screening these massively produced contents. I have a 5-year-old son, and right now we're in a war against candy because my son, well, I give him one candy a day and he keeps on saying, I don't remember if I had my candy or not, and he tries to eat more. So I'm trying to control his dose of candy per day, but he keeps on asking me for more candy. I'm not sure if you have kids or not, but if you do, you probably experience this. On the web, there's a lot of contents out there that kids enjoy, and not all of the contents are high quality. I read an article in the news that generative AI is used for creating content, and that content is delivered through YouTube and other platforms targeting kids. And there's a lot of such contents out there, but parents, if they are educated and they are aware, well, these parents can actually protect their children from these contents. But the less aware parents, if the parents are not in a situation where they can protect or control their students, their children's viewing of the social media contents, or if in that certain country it's difficult to control the contents, well, that can be an issue. So we really have to provide education for the students to have a discerning eye in terms of the contents that they enjoy and watch.
네, 있습니다.
Thank you for your remarks. So we did talk about education, and now let's switch the topic to work. So related to work, what are some considerations that we need to make? What are some questions or answers that you would like to share? Professor Ha or Professor Yu? I think I chose the wrong seat. Well, I did jot down some notes because I did not want to be derailed from the topic, but I'll try to be as simple as possible. In the future, the impact of AI on work and organizations can be thought of in two different ways. First, from the management and organization side, and second, from the labor side. From the management or corporate side, because I am a part of the business school, I work with a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs, and they all ask these questions. how can we leverage AI for our companies? And many managers have the will to introduce AI to their work, but at the same time, they are hesitant because they're afraid. But I don't see any success stories of using AI actually at companies. It seems that the utilization of AI is quite fragmented at companies. But I don't see any clear use cases. The reason for this is as follows. It's because when companies introduce AI, they approach this as a technology issue. But organizations are run by people. So when you introduce technology, you also have to think about the non-technical side. For example, when you're introducing AI, how should the work be reorganized? How will the interpersonal relations change? What about the middle managers? What will happen to the hierarchy? What will be the impact on evaluation and remuneration? So, introducing AI is quite expensive, but also working with these non-technical sides is just as important. So, when I talk to CEOs, what I mention is that you shouldn't just jump into using AI for your companies, but you have to take a look at what part of the company you wish to use AI for, and you need to have detailed plans and goals in introducing AI, and you also need organizational changes that are appropriate for utilizing AI. On the other hand, we have the labor side. At companies, when they introduce AI, companies do not listen to the opinions of the employees or laborers. I am actually limiting my talk related to knowledge workers. So we have nominal knowledge, for example, how to make kimchi. So you wash the cabbage, you put salt on it, and then you add the seasoning. And so you can follow the instructions to make kimchi, but what about the tactical knowledge? The kimchi that tastes like the kimchi made by your mother. So just following the recipe will not get you there. So when we wish to use AI for the company, not only should we just introduce it, but you need to have very detailed instructions for AI. So when you actually change your employees, you also have to leave the instructions for the next person. That is the same for AI. But the success of an organization also depends on knowledge that cannot be seen. For example, insights or know-how, interpersonal relations, the ambience that they create within the office. All of that is very important. So when we introduce AI to the company, how are you going to evaluate talent and reward talent? And how are we going to classify the knowledge that can be transferred and the knowledge that is non-transferable? So digital transformation is taking place in this direction, and it will be accelerated by AI. Thank you very much, Professor Yu. Rather than adding to that, maybe we can go to President Seo right away. Well, rather than adding to that, I would like to mention that there was a story that I am reminded of. This is related to what Professor Yu has mentioned, but it's also a question to Professor Sa. So because he is an expert in AI and Metabus. So I run a startup, and it gives me a lot of opportunities to meet other founders, other entrepreneurs. And it seems that there's a common need. So even if I'm not at the company, I need to have an avatar that can answer the questions of my employees as if the avatar is myself. And so that actually is an issue of efficiency. So many people have that common need, and that actually is about the knowledge that cannot be seen. So for instructions, we can write them down, but sometimes people will read those instructions and they will have to read into those instructions to actually understand what is said between the lines. And so in understanding what is said between the lines actually is not capable. It's not something that AI is capable yet. So you are researching social interactions of AI and Metabus, so I wonder if this is possible. Well, I don't think you should make your avatar, but rather you should automate your employees so that they don't ask questions at all. That would be the better way to go. The CEOs, it's difficult to have their avatars. I think that is quite a far-fetched story. What Professor Yu talked about is about AI, but I believe that he is saying that there are no successful use cases yet. So I would like to approach this from the automation perspective. I talked about translation and interpretation. And another example would be about unmanned shops. So you would actually use a kiosk to make your orders and make payments without any staff at the shops. So automation, how would automation impact our society? I am studying media and information. And so what about press? So what will be the impact of mass publications? So the people who would be scribing the books, they all disappeared. For example, in the past, there were people sitting at churches to copy Bibles by hand, but now that job has disappeared because you can print books and Bibles at a large scale. Some people are afraid that their jobs will disappear, but because Korea is a good country, I'm sure that there will be a system for social compensation and when they are phased out. And I don't think people will continue to be hung up on jobs that have disappeared for a long time. But in the phase out stage, I'm sure that there will be social compensation. So I think we have to think about our perspective for work. Because of automation, sometimes there is a lot of empowerment, and sometimes you are held accountable for specific jobs. For example, if you have unmanned shops, then in the past, the owner of the shop actually had to choose their own coffee bean, or they had to have an employee that could choose the coffee bean. They had to roast the coffee bean, and they also had to have staff for marketing, and they would also have to have someone to do the pricing. So there was a division of role, and many people would work together for the single goal of operating the shop. So people would make decisions together, and the owner of the shop would make the final decision. But now it's automatic. So for example, if there's a franchise, then they would decide the beans, the menus, the pricing. And so all you have to do is to decide whether or not you will make the decision to do this or not. And so you may become quite lonely. So personally, as people, I know that if you make a decision alone, you will be lonely and you will find the decision making very difficult. For example, even if you buy something new to wear, you will ask your friend, how does it look? And will that be replaced by automation? How much of a trust will you have for automation compared to your best friend? For example, if the recommendation was from your friend and you ask your friend, what should I have for lunch? Then if your friend recommends something, then you will follow the recommendation. Of course, you will blame the friend if the food is bad, but how much of a trust are you giving to recommendations from AI? Another important topic that I'm thinking about is how work will change. I talked about how education will change. Well, the tools and the method for education will change. For example, English will become just a tool, and you will think about why you're learning English, and that will be the same for work as well. For example, if you are cleaning, and we can automate cleaning, for example, there are robot cleaners. So In the past, cleaning was about picking up trash or getting rid of dust, but that can be done by robots and AI. And many of the cleaning staff will lose their job, but there will also be managers of cleaning staff. And these managers, they're not thinking about how to pick up trash, but rather to create a better environment, to create a pleasant environment. For example, put up a picture or to have a better scent for the room. So these managers will have to work with what is the goal of cleaning. And so that will be the change of work that we will experience. And people will be able to fill in what AI cannot do. For example, people will pick up trash in the past, but now robots can do that. And so we will see the change in the management for the cleaning staff.
And so I think that the concept of work will change and be reestablished. Yes, thank you very much. So that was very interesting. And there are a couple of points that I want to touch upon as well. So in the end, whether I work with AI or I interact and work with people, if I'm not good at my work, it means that I'm not good at what I'm doing. So the person who's good at work is good nevertheless. And so you really have to think about why that person is not good at what that person is doing, and it's in the details. And in my view, when it comes to the details, for example, if we take the case of the cleaning robot, you might think that the cleaning robot will do everything. But once you purchase a cleaning robot and you've tried that using the cleaning robot, you will know that there are some additional tasks that you have to do. For example, you have to rescue the cleaning robot, or you have to empty the dust box attached to the cleaning robot. So there were processes, step 1 and 2, that you had to do, but now there's an additional step or additional process that you have to do when you're using the cleaning robot. So if you have the procedural knowledge, and there's a procedural knowledge for everything. There's a recipe, for example, for cooking. And if you follow that recipe, then it may work. But however, there's more to that. There is the tacit knowledge associated with everything. For example, if it's kimchi or your mother's secret recipe, there's a tacit knowledge on top of the explicit knowledge of your mother's recipe. And for example, let's say that we can use AI to observe your mom to see what kind of interactions take place when your mom is cooking that dish. So on top of that explicit knowledge, that secret recipe, you can understand what the tacit knowledge you need to make that secret recipe-based dish of your mom. So it's the same for the cleaning robot as well. But anyhow, you talked about the CEO and the management, and will that person be replaced by AI? And let's say that that person was replaced by AI, thinking that AI would be able to do A, B, and C. But in fact, that person was doing D and E. So management thought that this person was doing only A, B, and C. But actually, D and E was also covered by that person. So we now understand that we were not aware that D and E was covered by that person. And if this was an actual business environment, then this could lead to a major accident. For example, the factory might not be operated because that person is not there. So, of course, partial adoption might be the best way to go because you have to have a full understanding of what the required work involves. So partial adoption might be the best way to go in the initial period, because when you work with students, it's the same as working with the employees at the business scene. When you're working with people, sometimes you don't always get your desired outcome. Why is that? It is because there's a fault from both sides. The person who's giving the instruction was not giving the detailed instructions. So on my side, I thought that I was giving the full instructions in the right context, but I was not communicating well. So it was my bad as well. And so we really have to think about the detailed instructions or the detailed communication. And without the detailed communication, replacing something might be a challenge. And also we talked about authority and responsibility when we're making decisions. And we're trying to use AI in that process. As you know, because AI is trained based on the data that we have to think about what will be the outcome of AI being involved in that decision making. Who will be accountable for the decision making if AI is involved? Will it be the developer? Because the service was sold by the business. Then is it the business that takes responsibility? Who will be accountable if an issue occurs? Let's say that there is a chatbot who takes in a very who speaks and uses words that's very racist. Of course, if we try to change the language used by the chatbot, things could get better. And if we interact with that chatbot, perhaps a person who uses that kind of language might also experience a change in the language that person uses. Anyhow, accountability is something we also have to think about. And we can't really say that accountability is with the developer side only. We can't only say that accountability or responsibility is with one side only. It's not just an issue limited to AI, because all of the various social issues is always not free from the issue of accountability. So I'm concerned that there might be situations where people tend to blame AI when there are problems that arise, because people are quite good at blaming others and pointing the finger at others. But I think that many things can differ based on how we adopt, implement, and utilize new technology and AI. So when it comes to business or the education side, it's the same. When we give work to AI, it's a human that gives tasks to AI. And of course, there are attempts to use AI for planning. And some professors say that AI is not capable of reasoning. And these professors, well, they are those who've majored in traditional machine learning. Of course, there are professors who have different views. But anyhow, I believe that I think that AI can, in general, create abstract, general knowledge. So for countries that are in an environment where, relatively speaking, it's difficult to receive quality education, I do believe to a certain level AI can be utilized to deliver knowledge, whether it's procedural knowledge or factual knowledge. I do believe there's a potential of utilizing AI in education. Of course, reasoning and planning, it might be too early to consider full adoption of AI, but anyhow, I think that there is potential for utilization of AI in education. Do you have any further words to add in relation to this? And if not, then because we are out of time, lastly, I think it would be great if you take turns and say your concluding remarks. Yes, so I did not have an opportunity to speak a lot about AI and work. So Professor Lee at the end, he talked about accountability. Who should be accountable? And these people, well, now they are professors. I'm working in the private sector, but we've studied together. As an entrepreneur, when I think about accountability, well, accountability is a little bit different from responsibility, but accountability is about taking on the risk. Who will take on the risk? So I think that it is not right to say that the person who benefits should take on the accountability, but nevertheless, risk and benefits go hand in hand. They go together. They're tied together. And we talked about how, in order for us to collaborate well with AI, it's the same. It's the same as working well with humans. We have to look at reverse engineering and think about what was needed for working well, interacting well with humans as well. And the last thing that I would like to add is that the app that I've developed, Contacts, well, I've developed AI with my engineers, and in the process, what I've come to learn is that AI has been developed to really promote the interaction among humans as well. And actually, the data is utilized in this process. And the conversations that we have, the dialogue that we have outside of work, for example, our daily conversations, actually can be very valuable information that provides context. That's what I've realized. A lot of businesses are adopting and implementing AI, and they're utilizing that as data, and they're trying to utilize such data. But the coffee chats or the daily communications and dialogue within their companies were found to be very important and useful source of data for them. Of course, there's the issue of privacy. And if you develop something within the workplace, that is under the ownership of the business. But when it comes to the ownership of data, of course, that's a very blurry issue, and we'll have to think about that. But anyhow, that's what I would like to, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. So let's go on to Dr. Yu.
저
I would like to be as concise as possible rather than talking about details, but given the development of AI and the penetration of AI, we are all going through a very important phase of transformation. I am above the age of 40, and it scares me when I think about whether I will be able to adjust to the future when the future arrives. Everything is changing, and I believe everything will change. And so at this given time, rather than declaring what the future will look like, we need to continue ask the important questions. I love playing games, and I also love reading Western mythology. And as I was playing a game, I came to realize this. Do you know Ouroboros? It is a picture of a dragon eating its own tail. So it's about coexistence and eternity because it continues to go in a circle. It could be about sustainability as well, and it could be about continuous development, but the shape itself is quite self-destructive. If you search this on YouTube, it is not a pleasant video because there's a snake that's eating away at its tail, so it is quite self-destructive. And I think AI actually shows the same double-sworded characteristics of the snake. And so I think this is an analogy that we need to keep in mind. So AI can give us sustainability in the future and coexistence if we use it in the right way. Thank you very much. Last but not least, Professor Sa. Work or utilization of AI and automation at the company, I think we need to go beyond that. When AI continues to develop, then AI can look like people and they can act like people. And recently, I have created a class on virtual interactions, and there are many creative proposals from the students. For example, in the movie Her, we see that AI becomes a girlfriend, and you can have human voice operating systems, or there could be sexual toys that look like people. So what would be the role for AI? Can AI replace humans altogether? Well, at first glance, it may look like it could happen, but in the movie Her, we see AI, and is that technologically possible? Because in the movie, AI has an intention. AI wants to date the man, and when the man does something for AI actually can feel happy. And that's only possible if the AI can model human emotions. And if the man is talking to thousands of AI, then that particular AI will feel jealousy. And that is not the only example that we can think of. For example, if you think about a teacher in a metabus, then you may think that that teacher is different from an actual teacher because it feels different. For example, Playview became #1 in music streaming, and that's quite successful as an AI. For example, because it actually replaced a K-pop group to be #1. The K-pop groups today, they actually talk to their fans, for example, saying goodnight using apps. Playview can do that as well. Of course, it can follow them superficially, but if K-pop continues to share how they eat and live their everyday lives, then will Playview be able to do that as well? I'm not so sure. So I am studying this area, and we have to think about sometimes why do we feel close to a certain being? For example, if you give birth to your child, you feel close to the child because you feed the child and you raise the child. And sometimes you feel close to another person because you eat together or drink together. In the past, we thought that that's not so important, but now we will think it's more and more important because AI will not be able to do that. Implicit knowledge, I think, is along the same lines. And so, in order to make AI more human, what about the fundamentals of humans, the fundamentals of relations? We have to think about those fundamentals. As a researcher, that is also a topic that I will continue to research in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for the insightful dialogue. I would like to wrap up the session with my remarks. So 2 things that I would like to mention. So when we go beyond AI, I hope that we will not think of AI as humans, because when we research, we tend to be more focused on humanoids. So we should not think in only that direction. And second, there will be more tools for achieving your goals. AI could be one of those tools, and there could be many different ways of using AI. There are also people who continue to scribe books, and it just that their numbers are decreasing. And so it seems that the way we conduct work will have a wider spectrum, and that means that we have to recognize diversity. We have many generations living at the same time, and not all generations will adopt new technologies, including AI, in the same way. And we will all have different generations living together. We will have older people and we will have younger people living together. And so we need to be aware of this diversity, and we need to remember that this diversity is important. And against this backdrop, we need mutual respect and things that we did not know about each other.
For example, when you interact with AI, you suddenly realize aspects about yourself that you didn't know about before. And so I think interactions with AI will actually clarify who we are and what our relationships look like. And it will bring us back to the fundamentals. Fundamentals meaning, why do we research? Why do we work? Why are we here listening to this dialogue? So we will find ourselves in positions where we have more opportunities to think about these fundamentals. Things that we did mechanically or out of habit will be things that we will continue to think about in more fundamental ways. Thank you for joining us throughout the session. And thank you for sharing your insights with us. I do believe that we can wrap up the session.
I think this was very inspiring. The humanity has crossed 3 industrial revolutions. We're in the middle of the 4th. And during each of the industrial revolutions, we've faced different types of challenges because of new technologies coming in. And I think AI is what we're facing in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution. And these types of discussions are essential to identify what AI can do and where AI should position itself in our society, both ethically and in a societal perspective. So thank you once again very much for the insightful discussions, and thank you for the great session. So this concludes the morning session for today. We will resume again with another quite IT-ish session at 1 p.m. after lunch. So I'll see you guys here at Grand Ballroom A at 1 o'clock. Thank you.